He thought she left him. For 12 years, Kang Jae-hyun, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul, believed the woman he loved had simply walked away. He built an empire on that grief. He married another woman on that wound. He wore his cold reputation like armor over a heart that never stopped bleeding. Then one night, inside his dead grandmother's house, he opened an old laptop, and the truth broke him in ways no enemy ever could. She hadn't left. She had been pregnant, and someone had made sure he never knew. If this story already has your heart, stay until the very end and drop a like, then comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The night Kang Jae-hyun's grandmother died, it rained in Seoul the way it only rains when something irreversible is happening. Not a storm, just a long, cold, indifferent downpour that soaked everything and cared about nothing. He stood at the window of the hospital corridor for 40 minutes after the nurses pulled the curtain. He didn't cry. He hadn't cried in years. He just stood there with his hands clasped behind his back and his jaw set hard, watching the rain streak down the glass, and tried to remember the last time he'd told her he loved her. He couldn't. That was the thing about becoming the silent wolf. You got so good at burying the soft parts of yourself that eventually you forgot where you'd put them. His assistant, Park Dae-won, appeared at his elbow with the respectful silence of a man who had learned exactly how close to stand and exactly when not to speak. Jae-hyun didn't acknowledge him for a long moment. "Arrangements," Jae-hyun finally said. The word came out flat, like a business directive. "Already contacted. The funeral home is waiting on your authorization. Tell them Wednesday. Small. No press." He turned from the window. "No flowers from the Shin family. I don't want their condolences in my grandmother's house." Daewon nodded and stepped back. That was the other thing about becoming what Jae-hyun had become. People stopped asking why. They just moved. He was 47 years old. He ran an organization that controlled 7 districts of Seoul's underground economy, had fingers in shipping, private security contracts, and real estate developments that didn't appear on any public ledger. Men twice his size grew careful when his name entered a room. His own lieutenants watched their words around him. His wife, if Sora Min could still be called that after 6 years of sleeping in separate wings of their Hanam-dong mansion, had stopped trying to reach him entirely. He was, by every external measurement, untouchable. He felt completely empty. The flight to Los Angeles 3 days later was long and quiet. His grandmother, Kang Soon-hee, had moved to California in her 70s. Insisted on it, actually, which had irritated his father greatly. She'd lived in a modest house in Koreatown for the last 11 years of her life, refusing the larger property Jae-hyun had offered to purchase for her, refusing the staff he'd tried to assign her. She had kept her own life, stubbornly and completely, right up until her lungs gave out at 83. He respected that about her more than he'd ever said aloud. The house smelled like dried flowers and old paper when he pushed through the front door. His security team waited outside. Inside, he moved alone through the small rooms, his footsteps careful, hands deep in his coat pockets. The furniture was modest. A floral couch that had survived decades, a dining table she'd covered in a crocheted runner, photographs on every wall. He stopped in front of one and stayed there longer than he intended. It was a photograph of himself at 17. He was standing in the courtyard of a school he hadn't thought about in years, squinting slightly into the light, one hand raised like he'd been saying something. He looked young in a way that almost startled him. Not in the face, the sharpness was already there, but in the posture. Something loose and open about the shoulders that was entirely gone from him now. He remembered who had taken that photograph. He made himself keep moving. The boxes were stacked in the small bedroom his grandmother had used as a study. Most of them were simple to sort. Documents, old photographs, folded letters in Korean that he set aside for a family archivist to catalog later. He worked methodically, without sentiment, the way he handled everything. His sleeves were rolled to the elbow and his jacket hung over the back of a chair, and he worked through the afternoon without pausing. The laptop was on the bottom shelf of a low bookcase, half hidden behind a stack of magazines and a ceramic figurine of a tiger that he remembered sitting on her desk when he was a boy. It was an old model, a silver machine that had aged to a dull gray, the hinge stiff when he pried it open. It shouldn't have started. The battery should have been dead years ago. But someone, his grandmother, he realized it must have been her, had kept it plugged in. It opened to a password screen. He tried her birth date. It didn't work. He tried his own birth date, then his father's. On the third attempt, without thinking clearly about why, he typed the date of his grandmother's own wedding anniversary. The screen unlocked. He almost closed it. Whatever was inside was probably nothing. Documents from years ago, photographs she'd saved digitally. He had no real reason to look, but then the email application opened automatically on the screen, and the first thing he saw was a name in the inbox that made his entire body go very still. Amara Williams. He sat down on the edge of the bed behind him without meaning to. The springs creaked under his weight. He sat for a moment without touching the keyboard, just breathing, the sound of his own inhales suddenly very loud in the small room. The emails were from 12 years ago. The most recent was dated November. 12 years, 4 months back, almost to the week. The subject line was blank. He opened it. Mrs. Kang, I don't know if he told you what happened between us. I don't know if he told you anything at all. I've tried everything else. I'm writing to you because I don't know who else to try. Please, if you have any way of reaching him, any way at all, I need him to know. I need him to hear it from me, not from Sora, please. His hand on the touchpad was completely motionless. He scrolled up. Not down. Up to the beginning, to the oldest email, and he began reading in order. The first was from 13 years ago, sent directly to his grandmother's address. He must have given Amara the contact at some point. He didn't remember it, but she must have known the address. Hi, Mrs. Kang. This is Amara, Jae-hyun's friend from school. I'm sorry to bother you. I know this is strange. I'm trying to find a way to reach him, and I don't know how. His phone isn't connecting, and I don't know who else to ask. If you see him, will you tell him I'm looking for him? I just need to talk to him. Thank you. Friend. She'd written friend. He understood why. He kept reading. The emails came in at intervals. First every few days, then weekly, then increasingly desperate. His grandmother had never mentioned them. He had no idea if she had read them. No idea if she had tried to reach him. No idea what she had known or chosen to keep from him and why. That question would have to remain unanswered now, and the weight of it settled on him like something physical. 3 emails in, Amara's tone shifted. Mrs. Kang, I need you to understand this is serious. I found out something, and Jae-hyun needs to know. I know he left. I know something happened with his family, and I know he had to go back. I'm not angry about that. I just need to tell him something that can't wait. Please. He stopped reading. He pressed 2 fingers against his mouth and stared at the screen. Then he kept going. The next one. I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I went to find Sora Min because she was the only contact I had for his family here, and she said she'd spoken with him. She said he knew I was trying to reach him. She said he wasn't interested in talking. I don't believe her. I don't believe she's telling the truth. But I don't know how to prove it. I don't know anything anymore. Sora. The name landed in Jae-hyun's chest like a dropped stone hitting cold water. She came to see me again today. She sat in my apartment and she was so calm. She said she'd talked to Jae-hyun and that he knew everything. She said he wanted me to know that it wasn't something he was prepared to be responsible for. She said he told her to tell me, those were her exact words, Mrs. Kang. Those were her exact words, that he never wanted this baby. Jae-hyun stopped. He read the sentence again. He read it a 3rd time, with the particular slowness of a man whose mind is struggling to process something it doesn't want to be true. I can't believe it. I keep telling myself I don't believe it, but then I think, he left without saying anything. He just disappeared. And maybe I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. Maybe the version of him I loved wasn't real. I don't know, Mrs. Kang. I don't know anything right now. I just know I'm sitting in this apartment alone, and I don't know what to do, and I thought he was the one person who would never let me face something like this by myself. His jaw was locked so tight the muscle in his cheek had begun to ache. He scrolled forward. He didn't want to. He made himself. The next email was 7 weeks later. It's done. I can't talk about it yet. I just wanted you to know, in case he ever asks, in case he ever cares enough to ask, that I did it alone. I went alone, and I came home alone, and I've been alone every day since. And I keep trying to understand how someone can say they love you and then send another person to tell you your baby isn't something they want. I keep trying to understand it, and I can't. There were 3 more after that. One asking if his grandmother had received any of these. One sent 6 months later that was only 4 lines long and very controlled, as if written by someone who had decided not to feel anything anymore. And then the final one, the one he'd seen first, the one sent to her in desperation. Please, if you have any way of reaching him. His grandmother had never replied to a single one. He sat in the small bedroom for a long time. The light outside changed. The room grew darker. He didn't move to turn on a lamp. He sat in the growing dark with the laptop open on his knees and the screen casting pale light on his face, and he felt something give way inside him that had been load-bearing for 12 years. He had been 17 when his father's men came for him in the middle of the night. He remembered the knock on his dormitory door, the 2 men in the hallway, the phone taken from his hand before he'd even fully understood what was happening. He had been told he was going home. He had been told it was urgent. He had been in the back of a car within the hour, and by the time he understood that he wasn't going to get the chance to make a phone call, not to Amara, not to anyone, he was already on a private flight back to Seoul. He had tried to reach her afterward. His father controlled his communications for months. Every phone, every email account, every avenue monitored. By the time he'd carved out enough private access to try, 6 months had passed, and Amara's number was disconnected, and no one at the school would give out student contact information. And he'd told himself that she had moved on, that she was smart and resilient, and that she had built herself a life that didn't require him in it. He had told himself that because it hurt less than the alternative. What he had never imagined, what had never once crossed his mind in 12 years of carrying her face with him like a wound that never fully scarred, was that someone had reached her before he could. That someone had sat in her apartment and told her, with his name in her mouth, that he didn't want their child. He thought he knew what Sora Min was. He had understood for years that the marriage was a transaction, that she had wanted the Kang name, the Kang network, the Kang protection. He had accepted that without much bitterness. He had accepted a lot of things without bitterness because bitterness required energy, and he had spent most of his energy for 12 years building something that would outlast his own misery. But this, he set the laptop down on the bed beside him and stood up. He walked out of the study and down the short hallway and stopped in front of the bathroom mirror and looked at himself. There were photographs on the walls around him, his grandmother's life, arranged chronologically without apparent intention. He looked at the man in the mirror instead. He was wearing a shirt that cost more than most people's monthly rent. His watch was Audemars Piguet. His hair was cut by a man who worked exclusively for 3 of Seoul's most powerful families. He had built himself into exactly the thing his father had wanted, and he had told himself for years that was simply what he was now. That the boy who had stood in a school courtyard with loose shoulders and called a girl's laugh. The most beautiful sound he'd ever heard was a previous version that no longer existed. He pulled back his left cuff. Under the watch on his wrist was a thin braided bracelet, faded, worn soft by years against his skin. She'd made it herself from thread she'd bought at a market near the school, sitting cross-legged on a bench while he complained she was taking too long, until she'd tied it around his wrist and told him to stop complaining and keep it on. He'd worn it every day since. He stood in front of the mirror and he let himself feel, fully, what he had spent 12 years keeping in a locked room inside himself. Not grief. Not exactly. Something rougher and more compound than grief. The specific anguish of a man who has just discovered that the story he built his entire life around was never the true story to begin with. Amara had been pregnant. Amara had tried to tell him. Amara had lost their child alone, believing he had sent another woman to his door to tell her he didn't want them. He turned off the bathroom light and went back to the study and opened the laptop again. This time, he navigated away from the emails. He went to the downloaded files folder, searching for anything else his grandmother might have kept, anything he had missed. He found a video file dated almost 12 years back. It was unlabeled. He opened it. It was a recording made on a phone, shaky and amateur, the audio slightly muffled. His grandmother's living room. He recognized the floral couch. And across from the camera, sitting very straight, was Sora Min. She was 24 in this video. She was already beautiful in the precise, composed way she still was. And she was looking directly at whoever held the camera without the slightest visible discomfort. "I handled it," she said. She won't contact him again. She thinks he told me to tell her directly. She believed it completely. A pause. It was easy, honestly. She wanted to believe someone would tell her the truth. People like that always make it easy. The recording ended. 12 seconds of footage. The metadata showed it had been sent from his grandmother's own phone number, which meant someone had sent it to her, which meant his grandmother had known, which meant she had been sitting on this for 12 years and had never said a word and had just died in a hospital bed in Los Angeles with this laptop plugged in and the password set to her wedding anniversary and every single email in that inbox undeleted. Tae-hyun sat very still. He thought about what that meant. He thought about an 83-year-old woman who had kept a secret for 12 years and then, at the end, had left a door unlocked. He didn't know whether she had meant for him to find it. He didn't know if it mattered anymore. What he knew, the only thing that felt clear and solid and unquestionable in a room that had begun to feel like it was moving, was that Sora Min had looked into a 22-year-old girl's eyes and told her the man she loved had rejected their child. And Sora had described it, on a recording she apparently hadn't known still existed, as easy. He closed the laptop. He sat in the dark. Outside, Los Angeles made its indifferent noise, traffic, a distant siren, someone's music leaking through a window somewhere. The city didn't know what had just happened in this small room. The city didn't care. He reached into his coat pocket and took out his phone. He called Daiwan. "I need you to find someone," he said. His voice was very quiet and completely level, the way it got when he was deciding something permanent. Her name is Amara Williams. She was a student at Yonsei International Academy 13 years ago. American, she would have come back to the States after she left Seoul. Find her. He paused. And I need Sora's location. Both at the same time? Yes. A silence on the other end, then, are you all right? Jae-hyun looked at the closed laptop on the bed beside him. Find them, he said, and ended the call. He sat alone in his dead grandmother's study in Los Angeles, and for the first time in 12 years, the armor he had spent his entire adult life constructing felt like exactly what it was. Not a foundation, not a fortress, but a thing he had built over a hole where something real had been. And the hole was still there, unchanged, waiting. Somewhere in this country, Amara Williams had lived 12 years believing he had abandoned her. 12 years carrying that. 12 years shaped by a lie told by a woman who had sat in her apartment and destroyed everything with a calm face and a borrowed name. He reached up and pressed 2 fingers against the faded bracelet on his wrist. He didn't know if she would speak to him. He didn't know if she would close a door in his face or look through him like he wasn't there. He didn't know what 12 years had made of her, or what the loss had cost her, or whether there was anything left in her that still remembered the boy who had promised her things he'd never gotten the chance to keep. But his grandmother had left a laptop plugged in with the password set to a date she knew he'd remember. That was not an accident. And Kang Jae-hyun, the man his world called the Silent Wolf, had spent his entire life learning how to read the messages people left when they couldn't say things out loud. He picked up his phone again. This time, he searched for a name he hadn't let himself search in years. Not because he had forgotten it, but because finding her had always felt like standing at the edge of something he wasn't ready to survive. The screen glowed in the dark room. His thumb hesitated. Then, 3,000 miles away, in a city he hadn't yet determined, a woman who didn't know he was looking for her was about to have her carefully rebuilt life interrupted by the one name she had spent 12 years training herself not to say out loud. Amara Williams had a system for mornings, and the system was the only reason she functioned. 6:15. Alarm. No snooze. She had learned years ago that the snooze button was a negotiation with yourself that you always lost. 6:20. Coffee, black, 2 cups, standing at the kitchen counter of her Atlanta apartment while the city outside her window did its slow gray warm-up toward another day. 6:40. The files. She was a forensic financial analyst now. Had been for 8 years. And the files were always waiting, always patient, always demanding the particular kind of cold attention that suited her better than most people realized. She was 34 years old. She had a reputation in her field for being exceptionally thorough and difficult to rattle. Her supervisor at the federal contractor firm where she worked had once described her, in a performance review she wasn't supposed to have seen, as relentlessly precise and socially selective. She had taken both as compliments. Her apartment was clean in the way that suggested effort rather than nature. Everything in its place, no excess, the kind of space that a person builds when they have decided that order is a thing worth fighting for. On her bookshelf, between financial forensics textbooks and a worn copy of a James Baldwin novel, there was a small framed photograph of her mother. Nothing else personal was on display. Visitors, of whom there were few, occasionally noted the absence of clutter and called it minimalist. Amara called it manageable. She did not think about soul. She had not thought about soul well, she tried not to track the number of days since she'd last let herself think about soul. Her phone rang at 7:48, while she was 40 minutes deep into a wire transfer discrepancy that was going to mean a very bad week for someone at a mid-sized logistics company in Charlotte. The caller ID said Marcus Webb, her oldest friend, a man she'd known since undergraduate, who currently worked as an investigative journalist in New York and had the specific gift of calling at the worst possible times. She let it ring twice before answering. "I'm working. Good morning to you, too." Marcus's voice was warm and slightly cautious in the way it got when he was approaching something sideways. "You eat breakfast?" "Marcus, I'm asking a normal question." "You never ask normal questions. What do you want?" A pause. She heard him exhale. "You remember me telling you I was working on that piece about international organized crime networks? The cross-border finance stuff?" Vaguely, she minimized her spreadsheet without meaning to, her hand going still on the mouse. "I've been pulling threads on this Korean syndicate, the Kang organization, based out of Seoul, one of the biggest independent networks in East Asia, heavy into legitimate business fronts. Real estate, logistics, private security." He paused again. "The man running it is named Kang Jae-hyun." The apartment was very quiet. "Amara, I heard you," she said. Her voice came out even. She had trained it to do that. "I didn't know if you knew about him, about what he became. I figured you deserved to hear it from someone who I've known for years," she said. That was true. She had found out about 4 years after she came back to the States, through a news article she hadn't been looking for, and she had sat with her laptop in a coffee shop in Chicago, where she'd been living at the time, and read the whole thing, and then closed it and ordered another coffee and not thought about it again, or tried not to. "It's not relevant to my life. His grandmother just died. He's in Los Angeles right now." She said nothing. "He's been asking around," Marcus said, and now his voice had dropped into something careful and deliberate. "My contact in Seoul mentioned it because they were doing background on the Kang organization for my piece. Jae-hyun apparently made some calls before he left, private investigator-type calls. Someone is looking for a woman matching your description, American, worked in Seoul around 13 years ago." He stopped. "I could be wrong. I might be wrong. But I wanted you to know before—" "Stop!" She stood up from her desk. She walked to the window and stood looking out at Atlanta's morning traffic moving 6 floors below, and she breathed very carefully through her nose. "You're telling me he's looking for me? I'm telling you someone fitting his profile is making inquiries. I can't confirm it's him personally." "Marcus, don't lawyer talk me." Another exhale. "Yeah, I think it's him." She pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window. Below, a delivery truck was stuck at a light. A woman walked past with a dog on a leash. The world continuing its ordinary business, indifferent to the fact that 12 years of carefully maintained distance had just developed a crack. "Okay," she said. "Okay? Okay, I heard you." She straightened up. "Thank you for telling me." "Amara, I have to get back to work, Marcus." She ended the call and stood at the window for 3 minutes, which she knew because she counted them deliberately, 1 breath per count, the way she'd learned to do when her body started making decisions her mind hadn't agreed to yet. Her heart was doing something unpleasant against her ribs. She was not going to let it. She went back to her desk and reopened the spreadsheet and stared at the wire transfer discrepancy for a long time without seeing it. Sora Min was having lunch when her phone showed her the notification. She was at a restaurant in Hanam-dong, at a table she had reserved 3 days in advance because she always reserved 3 days in advance. She liked having things in their designated places, liked the quiet authority of a confirmed reservation, liked the way the staff here treated her with exactly the correct amount of deference. She was having the cold noodles and a glass of sparkling water and reading messages on her phone with the particular half attention of a woman who had learned to process information while appearing to do something else. The notification was from a contact inside the Kang household security team. Just 3 words. He found it. Sora set down her chopsticks. She picked up the glass of sparkling water and drank from it slowly. Around her, the lunch crowd moved and murmured and did ordinary things. The afternoon light came in through the tall windows of the restaurant at a pleasant angle. Nothing about the scene was dramatic. Sora Min was not a dramatic woman. That was, she had always thought, one of her greatest strengths. She had married Kang Jae-hyun 6 years after Amara Williams left Seoul, and in those 6 years she had done everything correctly. She had been patient, she had been strategic, and she had been patient in the specific way that only people who understand long-game thinking can truly be patient. She had managed the household, managed the social relationships that mattered, managed the careful public image of a woman married to a man who ran an organization that could never be publicly acknowledged. She had been, by every measurable standard, exactly what the marriage required. That Jae-hyun looked through her like she was furniture. That was an inconvenience. She had anticipated a version of it. What she hadn't anticipated was how completely and permanently he had remained absent, not just physically, but in every other sense. He was in the house, and he was not there. He sat at the dinner table on the rare occasions they occupied the same room, and he was somewhere else entirely, somewhere she had never been permitted to follow, somewhere that had a name she had spent 6 years pretending not to know. She set the glass down. The contact's message was short, but she understood exactly what it meant. The laptop. His grandmother had kept it, which Sora had suspected but never been able to confirm. She had made discreet attempts over the years to have someone check the old woman's belongings, but Kang Soon-hee had been perceptive in ways that made access difficult, and eventually Sora had decided the risk of exposure was greater than the risk of the laptop's contents being found after the woman's death. Because who went through an old woman's computer in any meaningful way? Jae-hyun, apparently. She put money on the table, more than enough, and left without finishing her meal. In the car, she called her attorney. Jae-hyun had been back in Seoul for 4 days when he went to see Sora. He had learned where she was through Daewon, who had also confirmed, with some hesitation that Jae-hyun didn't have patience for, that Amara Williams was in Atlanta, Georgia, working for a federal contracting firm, and was, by all available information, currently single. He had also confirmed that Sora had spoken to her attorney twice in the 48 hours since Jae-hyun returned to Korea. She knew he knew. That was fine. He wanted her to know. She was in the sitting room of the East Wing when he found her, seated with precise posture in a chair by the window, a cup of tea cooling on the small table beside her, her phone face down on her knee. She was wearing ivory, which she often did, a color she had always understood suited her. She looked composed in the way that people look composed when they have been working at it very hard. He stood in the doorway for a moment. She didn't look at him. "You found the laptop," she said. "Yes." "I assumed you would." She picked up the tea, decided against it, set it back down. "I've been expecting this conversation for about 6 years." He walked into the room and stopped 10 feet from her. He didn't sit. He hadn't decided yet whether he was going to be able to hold still through this conversation, and he wasn't going to commit to a position from which he might need to move. "She was pregnant," he said. Sora looked at him for the first time. Her expression was careful, not guilty, not defensive, just careful, in the manner of someone who has rehearsed for an interview and is now waiting to see which questions are asked. "Yes," she said. The word landed in the room like a stone. "You went to her apartment and told her I didn't want the baby." "I told her what was necessary." "What was necessary?" He repeated it slowly, tasting it. "You sat in her apartment and you told a 22-year-old woman who was alone in a foreign country that the man she loved had sent you to tell her to get rid of their child. You looked her in the face and you said those words to her, and you went home and you described it, on a video recording that apparently my grandmother kept for 12 years, as easy." His voice had not risen. That was the thing about the way he had been trained. His voice was the last thing to go. "You said it was easy because she wanted to believe someone was telling her the truth." Sora's jaw shifted slightly. "Your grandmother kept that recording." "Yes. I didn't know she'd—" "I sent that to her as a report." She'd asked me to handle the situation, and I was reporting back. Something cold moved through Jae-hyun's chest. My grandmother asked you to handle it. Your father asked her to ask me, or he asked me directly, and she was informed. I don't remember the sequence exactly. She said it with the flatness of someone reciting old logistics. You were 17. You were heir to everything this family built. She was a girl you'd known for 1 year who had gotten herself pregnant and was threatening to complicate. Stop. She stopped. You're about to tell me it was about protecting the family. Don't. Sora pressed her lips together once, then released them. I was going to tell you it was about protecting you. I know you won't believe that. I don't. No. She looked out the window. I didn't expect you to. She lost the baby, he said. Alone. She went through it alone. She spent 12 years believing I sent you to her door to reject her. I know. It caused complications. Medical complications. She told someone that having children later became... He stopped himself. Something in his face shifted, not breaking exactly, more like stone starting to fracture. He breathed through it. I know, Sora said again quietly. Don't say that. His voice was very low. Don't sit there in that chair and say you know like it's something you accept. You destroyed her life. You destroyed mine. You spent 6 years in this house watching me disappear into myself, and you never once... What would you have done? She turned to look at him, and for the first time her composure cracked slightly. Not with guilt, but with something older and more complex, and, he thought, more honest. If I'd told you, if I'd said, years ago, here is what happened, what would you have done? Found her. And the organization, your father, everything that was built on the Kang name? It wouldn't have mattered. That's easy to say now. Her voice was sharper than it had been, the practiced calm fraying at the edge. You were 17, and your father had already decided what you were going to be, and I was the person he had chosen to stand next to you, and I thought... She stopped. She looked at her hands. I thought eventually you would choose it too. The life. What we had built. We didn't build anything. He said it without cruelty, which almost made it worse. You occupied space. That's not building. She said nothing for a moment. The afternoon light was going orange through the window. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked. I want a divorce, he said. I know. I want it clean. I want it fast. And I want you to understand that if you complicate it, if you make this difficult, if you attempt to leverage anything about the organization or about our arrangement, I will burn everything you have worked for down to the ground, and I will do it with a great deal of patience and absolutely no regret. He said it the same way he said everything at that register, not as a threat, as a statement of fact. Are we clear? Sora looked at him. Something moved behind her eyes. Not fear exactly, but the first honest reckoning she had done in years, visible for just a second before she brought it back under control. Clear, she said. He left the room. He didn't slam the door. He closed it with the quiet of a man who has made a decision and has no more to say about it. The divorce filing hit Sora's attorney's desk within 72 hours. Jae-hyun had anticipated resistance, had prepared for it the way he prepared for any negotiation, with documentation, leverage, and the specific patience of a man who understood that the first person to raise their voice in a room had already lost. But Sora's attorney's response was measured, almost cooperative, which told Jae-hyun that Sora had looked at what he had on her. The video, the deleted emails, the forensic record of the manipulation, and had made a calculation that fighting was more expensive than settling. Good. He didn't need it to be a war. He needed it to be over. What he hadn't anticipated was the photograph. It appeared on a Korean entertainment news site 4 days after the filing. Someone had leaked the divorce news, and attached to the article was a photograph taken at a charity event 2 years earlier, Jae-hyun and Sora standing together at a fundraiser for some foundation whose name he couldn't remember, both of them in formal dress. His hand at the small of her back in the performative gesture that public appearances required. The caption described him as estranged from wife Sora Min amid rumors of another woman. He wouldn't have cared about the article, except that Daewon showed it to him an hour after it ran, with an expression that Jae-hyun had learned to read over 11 years of working together, and said, "She's seen it." Sora. Amara Williams. He went very still. Her friend, the journalist, Marcus Webb, he monitors news about you as part of his research. He would have sent it to her. Daewon paused. There's also a comment in the article. Someone in the Korean expat community in Atlanta apparently recognized you from a previous article and tagged a mutual contact who... He stopped. It's the internet. It moves. Jae-hyun set down the document he'd been holding. She knows I filed, he said. Probably. Yes. Which meant she knew he was looking for her. Marcus Webb had warned her days ago, and now she knew the marriage was dissolving, and she knew, or could reasonably guess, that the two things were connected, which meant she was currently sitting somewhere in Atlanta making decisions about whether to run further or wait for what was coming. He understood her well enough, even across 12 years and the vast distance of who they had each become, to know that Amara Williams did not run. Not really. She went very still and very controlled and built walls, but she didn't run. She had stayed in her apartment after Sora's visit. She had kept trying to reach him. She had kept sending emails into silence. That was not the behavior of a person who ran. It was the behavior of a person who endured. He sat down at his desk and wrote her a message. Not a phone call. Not yet. Something she could read without having to respond to in real time. He wrote 4 drafts. The first 3 were too long, too explanatory. The kind of thing he might have written at 17 when he still believed that the right words in the right order could solve almost anything. The 4th was 9 sentences. He read it twice. He sent it. Then he booked a flight to Atlanta. Daewon appeared in the doorway of the study 20 minutes later and looked at the travel itinerary on the screen with the expression of a man who had long since stopped being surprised by his employer but was still occasionally concerned. "You're going yourself," he said. "Yes. Without just you, and keep it quiet." Jae-hyun closed the laptop. She won't respond to a delegation. Do you know if she'll respond to you? He picked up his coat from the back of the chair. Under his left cuff, the old bracelet pressed against his skin, soft and familiar, and there, always there, the one thing he had never been able to make himself remove. "No," he said. He said it like a man who was going anyway. Amara read the message at 11:47 at night, which was not when she normally checked her email. But she had not slept properly in 4 days, and the alternative to staring at her ceiling was staring at her screen. So she was staring at her screen when the notification arrived and she saw his name in her inbox for the first time in 12 years, and she sat completely motionless for 63 seconds before she opened it. It was short. She read it in under a minute, then she read it again. Amara, I found my grandmother's laptop. I found the emails you sent her. I found everything. I know that what I'm about to tell you doesn't fix anything that was lost or change what you went through, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But I need you to know that I never knew. I never knew you were pregnant. I never sent Sora to you. Everything she told you was a lie she constructed to separate us, and I spent 12 years thinking you had moved on by choice. I'm in Atlanta in 2 days. You don't have to see me, but I am going to be there, and I am going to be wherever you're willing to meet me for as long as it takes for you to decide. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. I'm going to try anyway. She put the phone face down on her desk. She sat in the dark of her apartment and pressed her hands flat on the surface of the desk, like she was trying to feel something solid. And she breathed in and out, the way she had taught herself to do when the old grief came up through the floor of her chest without warning. She had spent 12 years building a life that was clean and organized and manageable. She had spent 12 years in an apartment with no excess, no clutter, nothing she couldn't account for. She had spent 12 years being relentlessly precise and socially selective and very, very good at her job because those were things she could control. And control was the only language she had found after the year everything else was taken away. She picked the phone back up. She turned it over. She started typing a reply, then deleted it. Started again, deleted again. Outside her window, Atlanta was doing what cities do at midnight. Breathing slowly, holding its noise to a murmur, existing without any particular concern for the woman on the 6th floor who was trying to figure out whether the locked room inside her still had anything worth opening. She put the phone down again without sending anything. In 36 hours, Kang Jae-hyun would land at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. and he would come to her city with nothing but the truth and a bracelet he had worn on his wrist for 12 years. And Amara Williams, who did not run, would have to decide what she was going to do when the past she had spent 12 years organizing into manageable silence arrived at her door in person. And what she found when she looked inside herself was not the distance she expected, but something raw and more dangerous and much, much harder to file. She didn't reply to his message. She had decided, somewhere around 2 in the morning, that not replying was a form of control she was entitled to. That she didn't owe him a response simply because he had found the truth and written 9 sentences about it. She was entitled to silence. She had been practicing silence for 12 years and she was very good at it. She went to work the next morning at her normal time. She sat at her desk and worked through the Charlotte logistics file with the particular focus of a woman who has decided that professional precision is the appropriate answer to personal chaos. She ate lunch at her desk. She answered 3 emails from colleagues. She did not look at her personal phone for 4 hours, which was something she was proud of, until she looked at it at 2:15 and found a second message from him, sent at 6 in the morning Seoul time, which meant he had written it before boarding, which meant he had been awake at 6 in the morning composing a second message. And it said only, "I'll be at the Lowe's on Peachtree. I'm not going to show up at your office or your home. I'm just going to be available if you decide you want to talk. No pressure, no timeline." She put the phone back down. No pressure, she thought. The man who ran a criminal organization spanning 7 districts of Seoul's underground economy was sitting in a hotel 2 miles from her office and calling it no pressure. She went back to the wire transfer discrepancy. She stared at a cell in column F that was off by $43,000. She thought about column F for approximately 11 minutes before she admitted to herself that she was not thinking about column F at all. She picked up the phone and texted Marcus. "He's here." Marcus replied in under a minute. "I know. What do you need?" She thought about it. "Nothing yet. I'll call you." She put the phone away and kept working. She stayed at her desk until 6:15, which was an hour later than normal. And she took the long route home, which added 12 minutes, and she made dinner, actual dinner, pasta from scratch, which she never did on weeknights. Because she needed her hands occupied and the stove on and the ordinary noise of water coming to a boil. She ate standing at the counter. She washed the pot and the bowl and dried them and put them away. Then she sat down on her couch in the quiet apartment and looked at the wall for a while, and she let herself, just for a moment, actually think about what he had written. "I never knew you were pregnant." She had told herself over the years that she no longer needed that sentence, that she had passed through the stage of needing it and come out somewhere else, somewhere cleaner and more self-sufficient, somewhere that didn't require his accounting. She had said that to a therapist in Chicago 8 years ago, and the therapist had nodded and said that sounded like real progress, and Amara had believed it because she needed to believe it. She was less sure now. She picked up her keys at 7:43, which she would remember later because she looked at the clock on the microwave as she went past it, and she drove to the Lowe's on Peachtree, and she sat in the parking structure for 9 minutes, and then she went inside. The lobby bar was quiet on a Tuesday evening. She spotted him immediately. He was sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall, which she supposed was habit, a glass of water in front of him and his phone face down on the table, and he was wearing a dark coat that he'd draped over the back of his chair, and a plain charcoal shirt that made him look less like someone's idea of a mafia boss, and more like a man who was very tired and trying not to show it. He saw her at the same moment she saw him. He didn't stand immediately. He gave her a second to make the decision, to keep walking, to turn around. And when she didn't, he rose. He looked older. That was the first thing. Not badly. The sharpness had deepened. The jaw was harder. The gray at his temples had arrived with a kind of authority, but older in a way that reminded her, painfully, that the years had been real and the distance had been real, and neither of them were the people who had stood in a school courtyard in Seoul and believed they were going to figure everything out together. She stopped 3 feet from the table. "You came," he said. "Don't read into it." She sat down. Not in the chair he had indicated, in the one beside it, facing a different direction, because she needed to be making at least some of the small decisions here. "I have questions." "Okay." "I'm not here to forgive you. I want to be clear about that before we say anything else." "I know. And I'm not interested in—" She stopped. He was looking at her with an expression she remembered and had done her best to forget. The specific way he had always looked at her when he was actually listening, not performing listening, actually doing it, all the way in. She remembered finding it overwhelming when she was 22. She found it overwhelming now. Don't look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm something you lost? Her voice was steady. She was proud of how steady it was. You don't get to look at me like that. We're going to have a conversation like two adults and then I'm going to go home. All right, he said. She put her hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment. The video. On the laptop. My grandmother's, your grandmother's laptop. She corrected herself sharply. Sora sent it to her as a report. Yes. Which means your grandmother knew what Sora did. Yes. And she kept it for 12 years. Yes. Amara breathed in through her nose. Why? I don't know. He said it plainly, without dressing it up, which she appreciated in a grim way. She's gone, and I can't ask her. What I know is that she kept the emails too. Every one you sent her, and she kept the video, and she set the laptop up where I would find it. I think, he paused, I think she was waiting for the right time, or waiting to see if I'd ever be in a place where knowing the truth would do something other than destroy me. And are you, in that place? He held her gaze. I'm here. She looked away. The bartender moved at the far end of the bar, and the low sound of the room's air system ran under everything. Amara picked up the glass of water the server had put in front of her and drank from it because her mouth had gone very dry. I went alone, she said. She had not planned to say it yet. It came out because sitting across from him after 12 years had apparently compromised her sequencing. I don't know if you need to hear that or if it matters to you or what you do with it, but I want you to know that I went alone and I came home alone and I didn't tell anyone. Not for months. I told my mother 6 months later and she didn't handle it well, which I understood, but it meant I didn't have her either. And I spent the first year after I came back to the States I just worked. That's all I did. I just worked and I didn't let myself think about it, and I'm fine now. I want to be clear that I'm fine, but I need you to understand what fine cost. He said nothing for a long moment. His jaw was tight, and his hands on the table were very still, and she could see in the particular set of his shoulders that he was doing what she had been doing for 12 years, managing what was happening inside so that nothing uncontrolled came out. They had both gotten very good at that. It made her sad in a way she didn't have language for. I understand, he said. You don't. But I appreciate you saying it. He reached up and pulled back his left cuff. She saw the bracelet before she had prepared herself to see it, and something locked in her chest. I need you to know I never took it off, he said quietly. She looked at it for a long time. The threads were soft and faded, pale where they had once been bright, and worn down in a way that 12 years of daily wear would produce. She looked at it and felt something inside her become very unsafe. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. That doesn't fix anything. I know. That doesn't give me back the year I lost or the... She stopped again. She was not going to do this in a hotel bar. She had decided she was not going to do this in a hotel bar. Amara, I need to think. She stood up. I'm not running away. I want to be clear. I just need a day. I need a day to think, and then maybe we can... I don't know. She reached for her bag. I don't know what we can do, but I'll think about it. He nodded. He didn't reach for her. He didn't say wait. He just sat there with the bracelet visible on his wrist and let her make the decision herself. And she thought, going through the lobby toward the door, that either he had genuinely changed or he had gotten very good at understanding what she needed, and she wasn't sure which possibility frightened her more. She was in the parking structure, key in hand, when her phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize, sole prefix. She almost declined it. She answered, Miss Williams? The voice on the other end was a woman's. Korean accented English, precise and cool. My name is Min Sora. I believe you know who I am. The parking structure was concrete and fluorescent and very cold. Amara stood between two parked cars and felt the back of her neck go tight. I know who you are, she said. Good. Then you understand that I'm not calling to apologize or to ask for anything from you. I'm calling because there's something you should know before you make any decisions about what happens next. A pause. Bae-hyun is going to tell you he found the truth on his grandmother's laptop. He's going to tell you that he knew nothing about your pregnancy. He's going to ask you to believe that he was a victim of my manipulation the same as you were. Another pause, longer. I want you to ask him about the call. Mamam. Amara said nothing. Before his father's men came for him that night, before he was taken back to Seoul, he made one phone call. Not to you. He called his father. Voluntarily. He told his father about you, about the pregnancy. He told his father because he was scared, because he was 17 and scared, and he thought his father would help him figure out what to do. Sora's voice was even, unhurried, the voice of someone delivering information they have held for a long time. His father didn't help him. His father sent men to bring him home and had his communications cut. But the reason his father knew to act, the reason any of it happened, was because Jae-hyun himself told him. He's never told you that. Ask him. The line went dead. Amara stood in the parking structure for a long time. A car somewhere on another level started its engine, the sound echoing up through the concrete. The fluorescent lights hummed. She stood very still with her phone in her hand and the call log showing a Seoul number that she was already certain would trace back to a burner or a disconnected line. She walked back into the hotel. He was still at the table. He saw her face when she came through the door, and he was on his feet before she reached him. "Who told your father?" she said. She kept her voice low because they were in a public room and she was not going to make a scene. "About me. About the pregnancy. Before you were taken." "Who told him?" Something happened in Jae-hyun's expression. Something very fast and very controlled. A micro-movement across the face of a man who had spent decades learning not to react, but she had learned to read him a long time ago, and she had not forgotten the language. "Sora just called me," she said. "She said you called your father that night. Before they came, she said you told him about me." He was quiet for 4 seconds. She counted. "Yes," he said. The word took all the air out of the space between them. "Yes," she repeated. "It's not. I need to explain the context. Did you call your father and tell him about me and the pregnancy? Yes or no?" "Yes." His jaw was rigid. "I was 17 and I was terrified and I thought he might. I didn't think he would do what he did. I thought he would." "You thought he would help." Her voice had gone very quiet. "And instead he sent people to take you away and cut your communications. And I was left alone in an apartment in Seoul, pregnant by a man whose father knew and chose to erase me." She picked up her bag from the chair where she'd left it. "You said you never knew. You told me you never knew. I never knew about what happened to you after. I never knew what Sora did. I never knew you'd lost. But you knew, you told him." Her hand on the bag strap was tight enough that the leather was pressing red lines into her palm. "You knew for 12 years that you were the one who put me in reach of his decision. You could have told me that in the message you sent. You could have told me that in the hotel. You told me you never sent Sora to me, and that's true, but you knew you were the reason your father knew to act. That's not the same thing as knowing nothing." Her voice broke on the last word, not with grief, but with the specific fracture of a person who has just had the architecture of their understanding crack in a load-bearing place. "Amara, don't." She stepped back. "Don't say my name right now." She was at the door when his voice came after her. Not loud, not desperate, just very honest in the way that only comes from a person who has run out of strategies. I know I should have told you. I've known for 12 years that I was the one who cracked the door open, and I have lived with that every day. And I didn't tell you because I was afraid if you knew you would never let me explain the rest, and I still had more to tell you. That doesn't make it right. I'm not saying it makes it right." She stopped at the door. She did not turn around. The lobby was moving around them. A couple checking in, a staff member crossing with a luggage cart, the ordinary business of a hotel on a Tuesday night. Nobody was watching. Nobody cared. "I'll call you," she said, without turning. She went through the door. Outside, Atlanta's night traffic moved in its steady, indifferent stream, and Amara Williams stood on the sidewalk and breathed through it, in, then out, the way she always did, and tried to locate the version of herself that had walked into that hotel 40 minutes ago, feeling like she had her footing. It was gone. That version was gone. What she had now was worse than what she'd had before, because before tonight, she had a clean story. Sora had destroyed everything. Jae-hyun had been taken before he knew. She had been a victim of someone else's cruelty. Clean, organized, manageable. What she had now was a story with a seam running through it. A 17-year-old boy who loved her and was terrified and made one phone call that he thought would help, and instead had functioned like the first domino in a sequence that ended with her alone in a clinic in Seoul, believing the boy had abandoned her. That was harder. That was so much harder to hold than simple betrayal, because she could hate him for betrayal. She had been doing it for years, imperfectly, under the surface, the way you maintain a low-grade fever you've learned to function around. She could sustain that. What she could not as easily sustain was the image of a 17-year-old boy, scared and trapped and reaching for the one authority figure in his life the way 17-year-olds do, and having that reach become the instrument of her destruction. She walked to her car. She drove home. She did not call Marcus. She didn't have the words for it yet. She went into her apartment and she stood in the kitchen and she looked at everything in its correct place. The clean counter, the organized bookshelf, the single-framed photograph of her mother. And she understood, standing there, that she had built this space as a proof of concept. Evidence that she had survived. Evidence that she was functioning. Evidence that what had happened in Seoul had not broken her in any permanent way. She sat on the kitchen floor. Not dramatically. She just slid down the cabinet until she was sitting on the tile, back against the lower cabinets, knees up. The tile was cold through her clothes. She sat there and let herself be on the floor for a minute because she was very tired of performing structural integrity. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jae-hyun. There's more. Sora didn't call you to give you the truth. She called you to give you enough truth to push you away from me before I could give you all of it. I should have told you about the call. I didn't because I was afraid. But please don't let her decide what you do next. That's what she does. She picks the information she releases and she times it for maximum damage. There is more that she hasn't told you, and I need you to let me. Amara read it twice. She thought about a woman who had sat in her apartment 13 years ago with a calm face and borrowed authority and described the experience afterward as easy. She thought about a woman who had apparently spent 6 years in a marriage with a man who didn't love her, in a house where she was furniture and had still, tonight, after the divorce filing, after everything, picked up a phone and called the one person who might still derail the things she feared most. Whatever Sora Min was, she was not passive. And Jae-hyun was right that she had picked the information carefully. He had confirmed the call voluntarily. That meant he'd been going to tell her, that the call was already something he'd decided to disclose, and Sora had simply forced the moment. But Sora had stopped there. She hadn't told Amara everything. She had given her exactly enough to damage and no more. Which meant there was more. Amara sat on her kitchen floor with her phone in her hand and the question of what else Sora was holding. And then her phone buzzed a second time. Not Jae-hyun this time. An unknown number, Atlanta area code, a text with no greeting, just a link to a document hosted on a private file sharing site. She opened it. It was a medical record, her own. From a clinic in Seoul 13 years ago. Her name, her patient number, the date, the procedure. She had a copy of this. She knew this document existed. It was not the document that made her hands go cold. It was the annotation at the bottom. Handwritten, scanned in, a note in Korean that she could read because she had become fluent in the years since. A note she had never seen before on any version of this record. And the note was in a handwriting she recognized from the video on the laptop. And it read, "Arranged by SM, Kang family, aware and in agreement. Patient has been informed of family's decision. Kang family aware and in agreement." Not Sora acting alone. Not a single woman's scheme executed in isolation. Kang family. Her phone was ringing. Jae-hyun's name on the screen. She didn't answer. She stared at the document and felt the entire architecture of the last 40 minutes restructure itself around a worse truth than the one she'd been standing in 10 minutes ago. The Kang family had known. Someone in that family, his father, an uncle, someone with the authority to annotate a medical record and have it filed, had known what was happening to her in that clinic and had signed off on it, had described it as arranged. had described the Kang family as in agreement with a procedure performed on a 22-year-old woman who believed she was making a devastated personal choice. The phone stopped ringing. The kitchen was very quiet. Amara Williams sat on the cold tile floor of her organized, manageable apartment and looked at a document that meant that what had been done to her 13 years ago was not the impulsive cruelty of a jealous woman acting alone. It was coordinated. It was sanctioned. It had been recorded in writing as a family decision. And the man she was deciding whether to trust was the man whose family name was on that record. Her phone began ringing. She answered on the fourth ring. "Who sent me that document?" she said. Not a question, a demand. Jae-hyun's voice on the other end was very controlled in the way that things are controlled right before they stop being controlled. "Where are you?" "Home. Who sent it?" "I don't know yet. Daiwon is tracing the number. Amara, I need you to listen to me very carefully. That annotation on the record. I need you to let me explain what that means before. It says Kang family aware and in agreement." Her voice was flat and precise, the voice she used in depositions when she needed a number confirmed before she moved to the next number. "That's what it says, in your family's name, on my medical record, from a clinic in Seoul 13 years ago." Silence on the line. 3 seconds of it. "Yes," he said. She closed her eyes. "That was my father," he said. "Not me. I want to be absolutely clear. I did not know that document existed. I did not know anyone had annotated your record. My father had contacts inside medical facilities in Seoul going back decades. He had access to records that should never have been accessible to anyone outside that clinic. What he did with that access was..." He stopped. She heard him exhale hard. It was his way of closing a file. He considered it a family matter that had been resolved, and he documented it, the way he documented everything, as a transaction. A transaction. The word came out of her like something expelled. He documented what happened to me as a transaction. He was a man who believed everything in the world was a transaction. He is dead. He has been dead for 4 years, and Amara, I cannot give you the confrontation with him that you deserve because he is not available for it. What I can tell you is that I did not know. What I can tell you is that finding out right now, on the phone with you, is..." He stopped again. "Don't tell me how you feel right now." She stood up from the kitchen floor. Her legs were stiff. She hadn't realized how long she'd been sitting. "I don't have room for how you feel right now." "Okay? I need to think." "I know. But Amara, someone sent you that document tonight. Someone who had access to a sealed medical record from a private clinic in Seoul 13 years ago. That is not a coincidence. That is not someone trying to help you. Whoever sent that to you is using it as a weapon, and they timed it specifically to... I know what it was timed for." She was already moving through the apartment, pulling her laptop open on the desk with one hand. "I'm not an idiot. I never thought you were." "Sora has that document." A pause. "Probably. Or someone in your organization with access to your family's old records. Also possible. How many people have that kind of access? Currently?" She could hear him thinking, sorting through something. 3, possibly 4 if Sora retained contacts from before the divorce filing. Amara sat at her desk and pulled up the file sharing link again, examining the metadata. She had done forensic work on documents for 8 years. The habits were automatic. The file was created 6 weeks ago. Whoever pulled this record did it 6 weeks ago, before you even found the laptop, before the divorce. This wasn't reactive. Someone has been preparing this. The line went quiet. 6 weeks ago, he said slowly. Yes. She heard something shift in his voice, a recalibration. That means they knew I was going to find the laptop. Or they knew the grandmother had it, and they were moving before you could get to it first. She stared at the metadata. Someone in your organization, Jae-hyun. Someone who knew about the laptop, knew about me, and has been building something for at least 6 weeks. This isn't Sora working alone. She heard him say something in Korean, low and sharp, not at her, at someone in the room with him. Then back to her. I'm coming to you. No. Someone just sent you a sealed medical record to your personal phone number. That means they have your number. That means they are positioned close enough to this situation to be targeting you directly, and I am not going to sit in a hotel while... Jae-hyun, her voice cut across his. If you come to my apartment right now, You will be making a decision for me about my safety that I have not asked you to make. Do you understand what I'm saying? A long pause. Yes. Good. Stay where you are. Let your man trace the number. I will call you in an hour. She closed the laptop. And Jae-hyun, whoever sent this wants me to walk away from you. I want you to know that I understand that. I haven't decided anything yet, but I understand the mechanics of what just happened. Don't do anything aggressive until we've talked. She ended the call. She sat at the desk for a moment, hands still on the laptop, and let herself feel the full weight of what the last 2 hours had deposited in her chest. It was substantial. It was the specific weight of a person who has been told, in several consecutive installments, that a thing they believed was simpler than it was, and that the simplest version they had finally arrived at was still not the bottom. She got up and changed her clothes and made coffee and sat with it in the dark and thought about the annotation on the record. Patient has been informed of family's decision. She turned that sentence over in her mind the way she turned document language over when she was looking for the load-bearing lie. Not patient has consented. Not patient has agreed. Patient has been informed. Passive. Bureaucratic. The language of a man who considered her a variable in a calculation that had been concluded. She thought about a 17-year-old boy calling his father. She thought about what it cost to be that boy and make that call, and then spend 12 years knowing it. She thought about Sora Min on the phone in a parking structure, delivering half a truth with the timing and precision of someone who has been playing a longer game than anyone knew. She finished the coffee. She called Marcus. I need you to run something for me, she said when he picked up. Off the record, not for your piece. What is it? Kang Organization Internal Records Access. Who in the current structure would have retained access to Kang Dae-jung's personal files? That's Jae-hyun's father, died 4 years ago, after the leadership transfer. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's a narrow question. You already have a candidate. I have two. I need you to narrow it. Amar embrace? Marcus, please. She heard him exhale. Give me a few hours. Jae-hyun didn't sleep. He sat in the hotel room with Daewon and a laptop and worked through the phone trace for 2 hours until it came back clean. The number that had texted Amara was a burner purchased in cash at a convenience store in Buckhead 3 days ago. 3 days ago, which meant whoever had bought it had been in Atlanta for at least 3 days, which meant they had preceded Jae-hyun's arrival by a full day. He stood at the window and looked at Atlanta's skyline and thought about 6 weeks. Someone had pulled that medical record 6 weeks ago. Someone inside the Kang organization, or with retained access to the Kang organization's historical files, had been building this for 6 weeks, with a precision and patience that he recognized as professional. Who knew about the grandmother's laptop? He said. Daewon looked up from the laptop. You, me, and whoever your grandmother may have told. Who in the organization knew I was coming to Los Angeles? I told no one the purpose of the trip. The security team knew the destination. 4 men, all cleared to Tier 1. 4 men. Jae-hyun turned from the window. And Sora's contacts inside the household security team. Daewon's expression shifted. You said she had a contact. I received a notification from a contact inside the household security team the day I found the laptop. He had known this for days and had been moving around it, reluctant to name it because naming it meant acting on it, and acting on it meant a confrontation with a layer of the organization that he had been careful not to disturb during the divorce proceedings. Someone in my own security tier has been reporting to her, which means someone in my own security tier has also had access to the communication around my trip to Atlanta, and if Sora directed them to move, if she told them to prepare the document and deploy it at the right moment, she would have needed the record itself, Daewon said. That came from your father's personal archive, not from household security. Who manages the archive? A silence. Lee Sung-min, Daewon said. The name settled in the room like something solid. Lee Sung-min was 51 years old. He had served the Kang organization for 26 years, first under Jae-hyun's father, and then, seamlessly, under Jae-hyun. He managed the organization's historical records, the paper trails that didn't officially exist, The archive of documentation that Kang Dae-jung had accumulated over decades of transactions he needed recorded but not accessible. He was quiet, competent, and so thoroughly embedded in the organization's infrastructure that Jae-hyun had stopped thinking of him as a person with independent motivations and had started thinking of him as furniture. He knew the feeling from somewhere. "Call him," Jae-hyun said. "It's 3 a.m. in Seoul. Call him." Daewon made the call. It went to voicemail on the first try and the second. On the third attempt, Lee Sung-min answered with the carefully neutral voice of a man who had been awake and waiting. "Sir," he said. "Put him on speaker," Jae-hyun said. Daewon did. "Sung-min." Jae-hyun crossed the room and stood over the phone on the desk. 6 weeks ago, someone accessed my father's personal archive and pulled a sealed medical document, a private clinic record from 13 years ago, patient name Amara Williams. That document was in Atlanta 2 hours ago. He paused. "I need you to tell me who pulled it." Silence on the line. "Sung-man." "I'm here." The man's voice had changed. Not dramatically. He was too experienced for dramatic changes, but in the small calibration of someone who has been caught and is deciding in real time how much of that to acknowledge. "I need to understand the context of—" "No, you don't." Jae-hyun's voice had dropped to the register that his lieutenants called the dead calm. "You need to answer the question I asked. Who accessed my father's archive 6 weeks ago?" A longer silence. "I did," Lee Sung-min said, "on a directive." "Whose directive?" "Sir, I've served this family for 26 years. I served your father and I've served you, and I want to be clear that what I was asked to do was framed to me as a protective measure." "Whose directive?" The pause that followed lasted long enough that Jae-hyun could hear his own heartbeat. "Min Sorasi contacted me 7 weeks ago," Lee Sung-min said. "She said she had reason to believe you were going to Los Angeles in connection with your grandmother's estate, and that there may be materials in the estate that could expose the family to legal liability if they became public. She said she was acting to protect the organization's interests. She asked me to locate and retrieve documents from your father's archive that related to the Williams matter from 13 years ago, to be held ready for deployment if needed." "Deployment," Jae-hyun repeated. Those were her words. "And you didn't think to bring this to me?" Another pause. "She said you had authorized it." The room was extremely quiet. "She said I authorized it," Jae-hyun said. "Yes, sir. She said it was a security measure you had approved but didn't want on record as a direct order from you, for insulation purposes. The framing was consistent with procedures your father used to use. I had no reason to—" The man's voice, for the first time, developed a faint crack. "I understand now that this was not what she represented it to be." Jae-hyun stood very still, with his hands on the desk, and looked at the phone and breathed through the specific rage of a man who has just been told that the woman trying to destroy his life used his own father's procedural language against him, used the architecture of the organization's own security culture, used 26 years of a man's institutional loyalty as a tool. "You're going to fly to Atlanta," he said, "tonight. You're going to bring everything, every document, every communication from Min Sorasi over the past 7 weeks, every record you pulled, every copy of everything. You're going to bring it to me, and you're going to give a full accounting, and then we are going to discuss what happens next." He picked up the phone and took it off speaker. "If I find out you are not on a plane in the next 4 hours, you will discover that 26 years of service to this family does not provide the protection you may currently believe it does. Are we clear?" "Yes, sir." The voice was very small. "I'm sorry, sir." He ended the call. Daewon was looking at him with an expression that had moved beyond his usual professional composure into something closer to genuine concern. "She's been running a counter-operation," Daewon said. "Since before you found the laptop. She anticipated it. She had a contact in household security who flagged my grandmother's condition months ago. She started preparing when she knew the grandmother was dying." He moved to the window again. "She knew what was on that laptop. She knew it existed. She's been preparing to deploy the father's record as a counterweapon in the event I found it, and went looking for Amara." "The annotation," Daewon said. "Kang family in agreement. She knew that line would—" "She knew exactly what that line would do to Amara." His jaw was locked. She couldn't stop me from finding the truth, so she built a second truth, a worse truth, designed specifically to make Amara believe that even if I was ignorant of what Sora did, I came from a family that had signed off on it, designed to make me irredeemable by association. His phone lit up on the desk. Amara's name. He answered immediately. My contact came back, she said. Her voice was stripped down to its essentials. No affect, no performance. She was in analyst mode, which he recognized. Lee Sung-min. He's been your father's archivist for 26 years. Sora contacted him 7 weeks ago. I know. I just spoke to him. A brief pause. You already had him. Yes. Okay, she breathed. So she's been running this for 7 weeks. Yes. And the document she deployed tonight is real, he said. I'm not going to tell you it isn't. My father annotated that record. He did what the document says he did. The annotation is genuine. He pressed 2 fingers against his mouth for a moment, then dropped his hand. What Sora used it for is manipulation. What my father did with it is a fact I cannot erase. Both things are true, and I understand that both things land on you the same way regardless of Sora's intent. Silence on the line. He heard her breathe. Your father is dead, she said. Yes. And you didn't know? No. And Sora weaponized a real document, a real record of a real thing your family did, and timed it specifically to hit me at the moment I was already the most destabilized. It wasn't a question. She was building the structure out loud, the way she must do when she's working through forensic evidence, constructing the sequence. She couldn't make the document false, so she made the timing devastating instead. Yes, another silence, longer. He waited. I'm going to need you to be honest with me about something, she said, and I need the actual answer, not the answer that you think will keep me on the line. Okay. Is there more? Is there anything else in your family's history with what happened to me that you know about and haven't told me? He looked at the Atlanta skyline through the hotel window. The city was doing its 3 a.m. thing, quieter, emptier, the lights still on but the urgency drained out. My father paid for your flight home, he said. When you left Seoul, he arranged it through an intermediary. I don't know if you knew that or if you thought you'd arranged it yourself, but his people facilitated it. I found that in the archive last year, before any of this. And I didn't know what to do with it, and I filed it away because at the time I didn't know where you were or whether I would ever be in a position to tell you. He stopped. That's everything. That is the complete inventory of what I know. The silence this time had a different quality. He paid for my flight home, she said. Yes. So he made sure I was gone. Yes. She made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh and wasn't quite a sob and was something he had no name for. He was thorough. He was, Jae-hyun said. He was an extremely thorough and extremely ruthless man, and I spent my entire adult life building an empire on the infrastructure he created, and I have never been more aware of what that means than I am right now at 3 a.m. on the phone with you. She didn't respond to that. He hadn't expected her to. Sora is going to move again, she said. She's been ahead of this the whole time. Whatever she has left, she's going to use it. Yes, I think so too. Then we need to move first. Her voice had shifted again. The grief under it hadn't gone anywhere, but something else had come to the surface, something harder and more directed. Lee Sung-min is coming to Atlanta? He'll be on a plane within 4 hours. When he lands, I want to be in the room. He paused. Amara. He has communications from Sora. 7 weeks of communications. I do forensic financial analysis for federal contractors, Jae-hyun. I spend my days building evidentiary records from document trails. You need me in that room. She said it without pride, just competence, the way she must say everything at work. You can be angry at me later for inserting myself. Right now we have a window before she deploys whatever she has left, and I am not going to sit in my apartment while you handle it without me. This is my history she's been weaponizing. I have a right to be in that room. Yet Korean Mafia Bosses. He was quiet for a moment. Yes, he said. You do. Text me when he lands. She ended the call. He stood at the window for a long time after. Daiwan, with the perceptiveness of a man who had served him for 11 years, had moved to the other side of the room and was making coffee on the hotel machine with his back turned, giving him whatever privacy was available in a shared hotel suite at 3 in the morning. The bracelet on his wrist was warm from his skin. It was always warm. He had stopped noticing it mostly, the way you stop noticing something that has been present every day for 12 years. But tonight, he noticed it with the clarity of something newly relearned. At 7:14 in the morning, Lee Sung-min's flight landed at Hartsfield Jackson. By 8:40, he was in a conference room on the 14th floor of the Lowe's, gray-faced and careful, a hard drive and a folder of printed communications in front of him on the table. Amara walked in at 8:53. She was in dark slacks and a gray shirt, and she had the particular stillness of someone who has made peace with what they're walking into. She sat down across from Lee Sung-min without looking at Jae-hyun, opened her laptop and said, without any preamble, "Start from the beginning, the first contact, date, method, what she said." Lee Sung-min looked at Jae-hyun. Jae-hyun nodded. The man started talking. What came out over the next 90 minutes was the architecture of Sora Min's 7-week operation, methodical, layered, and more extensive than either of them had understood. She had not just prepared the medical record, she had prepared a complete package. Documentation of Jae-hyun's father's involvement presented in a framing designed to implicate Jae-hyun himself, a series of intercepted communications from the early years of the Kyung organization that could be read, out of context, as Jae-hyun's personal endorsement of his father's methods, and a contact, a journalist, not Marcus, someone else, someone with a wider platform and less personal loyalty, who had been provided with selective materials and was currently sitting on a story that, if published, would reframe the entire narrative of who Jae-hyun was and what he had done and what had happened to Amara Williams 13 years ago. Amara absorbed all of it without expression. She asked precise, sequential questions. She requested documents, examined them, annotated her own copy. She asked Sung-min 3 times to repeat himself on specific details, and each time he repeated himself, her expression didn't change. When he finished, she closed her laptop and looked at Jae-hyun for the first time since she'd walked in. "She's going to publish," Amara said. "The journalist contact. She's been building toward that as the nuclear option. If the divorce goes through and he comes back to me and the organization weathers it, she publishes. And the story becomes that Kang Jae-hyun personally orchestrated what happened to me 13 years ago and has been suppressing it." She held his gaze. "It destroys you publicly, and it reframes my history as something that was done to me by you specifically. It turns me into a story. It takes everything that was mine and makes it about your crimes." Her jaw tightened. "She doesn't just want to keep us apart. She wants to burn everything down and make sure neither of us can build anything from the wreckage." The room was quiet. "The journalist," Jae-hyun said. "Do you have a name?" Lee Sung-min gave a name. Amara's expression shifted. Barely. A micro movement. But Jae-hyun had been reading her face for 24 hours, and he caught it. "You know him," he said. "No." She paused. "I know someone who does." She was already reaching for her phone. "Marcus Webb has been running background on your organization for 6 months. He has more documented sourcing on the Kang family's actual history than anyone outside it. If Sora's journalist is working from selective materials, if he's been given a curated package designed to mislead," she stopped. "Marcus won't sit on a story for a source who burned him with bad materials. If I can get Marcus the full picture, the real documentation, the full timeline, the proof that the annotation was Kang Dae-jung acting unilaterally and not you, he can counterpublish. He can put out the accurate story before the manipulated one lands." Jae-hyun looked at her. "That means going public," he said. "All of it. My father, the record, what Sora did, what I did." He was very still. "My organization's exposure. I know what it means." She met his eyes directly. "I know what I'm asking. If you go public with the truth, the clean version of this story still contains your family authorizing a procedure on a woman without her full consent in a foreign country 13 years ago. That doesn't go away. The truth is still damaging." She didn't look away. "I'm asking you if the truth is something you're willing to stake everything on. Not because it protects you. Because it's the only thing I have left that belongs to me, and I am done having other people decide what gets done with it." The question sat in the air between them. Everything he had built, The organization, the network, the decades of carefully maintained opacity rested on a version of events that could not survive full disclosure. A public accounting of his father's methods, his father's reach, the manner in which the Kong family had treated a 22-year-old woman as a problem to be managed. That was not a story from which you rebuilt an empire. It was a story from which you walked away from an empire. He looked at Amara Williams, sitting across a conference table from him, with her laptop and her forensic mind and 12 years of organized survival behind her eyes, asking him whether he was willing to burn the thing he'd spent his entire adult life constructing in exchange for the truth being told correctly. His left hand was resting on the table. The old bracelet was visible below his cuff. He made the only decision that felt like himself. Not the silent wolf, not the Kang heir, not the man his father had built, but the 17-year-old boy who had once believed that the right thing and the hard thing were usually the same thing before the world had spent 2 decades teaching him otherwise. "Call Marcus Webb," he said. Amara held his gaze for one more second. Then she picked up the phone. At that exact moment, Daiwan's phone lit up across the room with a message from their sole contact. Sora Min had just boarded a flight to Atlanta, wheels up 40 minutes ago. Estimated arrival. Sora Min landed at Hartsfield-Jackson at 11:47 in the morning. Daiwan had the flight information, the terminal, and the gate. He also had 2 men positioned at the arrivals level who were not there to intercept her. Jae-hyun had been explicit about that, had said it twice in the kind of voice that made explicit things stay explicit, but to confirm her movements and report back. He did not want her surprised or cornered in an airport. He wanted her to come to them, because a woman like Sora always moved toward the things she believed she controlled, and right now she believed she was arriving with a weapon that nobody had yet disarmed. She was wrong about that, but she didn't know it yet. Amara had been on the phone with Marcus Webb for 40 minutes, while Sungmin's documents ran through her laptop in sequential order. Her annotations building the evidentiary structure with a speed and precision that Jae-hyun watched from across the conference table, with the particular feeling of a man watching someone do the thing they were made for. She spoke to Marcus in the flat, exacting language of someone delivering sourced information for verification. Dates, document numbers, chains of custody, the specific metadata that distinguished authentic records from curated ones. She didn't editorialize. She didn't tell Marcus what to conclude. She gave him the materials and let him build his own architecture, because she understood, better than most, that the conclusions you reach yourself are the ones you'll defend. When she hung up, she sat for a moment with her hands flat on the table. "He needs 4 hours," she said. "Does he have everything he needs to counter the story?" "He has more than the other journalist has. Whether that's enough depends on the other journalist's ethics." She looked at her laptop screen. "Marcus thinks he can reach him directly, journalist to journalist. Show him what he's been handed, and let him decide if he wants to be the person who published a story Sora Min built." She closed the laptop. Some people make the right call when they understand they've been used. Some don't. "And if he publishes anyway," she looked up at him, "then we deal with that. But at least Marcus's version is out first and it's sourced correctly." She paused. "I've spent 8 years building evidentiary records. I know what holds and what doesn't. What we've built this morning holds." Jae-hyun nodded. He looked at Lee Sung-min, still seated at the far end of the table with the diminished posture of a man who has spent the morning accounting for himself. "You'll give a full written statement. Everything you told us, in sequence, signed and dated." "Yes, sir." "And you'll make yourself available to whatever process follows." "Yes." Jae-hyun looked at him for a moment, at the 26 years of loyalty that had been redirected by one woman with the right framing and the right language. He thought about what his father had built and how it had been built and the specific kind of culture it had created, where people learned to act on implied authority because the man at the top had always operated that way. He had inherited that culture. He had maintained it. He had told himself for years that he was different from his father in the ways that mattered. And sitting in this conference room with the full accounting laid out across a table, he understood that the ways he had been different had not been sufficient. "You can go," he said to Sung-min. "Don't leave Atlanta." The man left. The room was quieter without him. Amara was looking at her phone. "She just cleared customs." "Yes. She's coming here." "She'll go to the hotel first. She has a contact in my security team. She'll know I'm here." He stood up. "She's going to want a meeting." She's going to think she's arriving with leverage and she's going to ask for one. Amara set the phone down. And you're going to give her one. Yes. She looked at him steadily. I want to be there. He had expected this. He had thought about whether to argue it. Sora is going to say things in that room that are designed to cause damage to both of us. She's going to be precise about it because that's how she operates. I know how she operates. She's going to look at you across a table and she's not going to apologize. She's going to explain. She's going to make it logical. She's going to make it sound like a series of reasonable decisions made by a reasonable person, and it's going to be the most infuriating version of the truth you've ever been handed because parts of it will actually be coherent. Amara's jaw tightened slightly. I've interviewed people who embezzled retirement funds from their own employees and explained it as a cash flow management strategy. I can handle coherent. He held her gaze for a moment. Okay, he said. Sora arrived at the hotel at 12:50. She came alone, which Jae-hyun had not expected and which told him something, that she had calculated a solo appearance as the stronger position, that she understood bringing anyone with her would read as defensive. She was in a charcoal dress that she had presumably packed for exactly this kind of meeting, and her hair was pulled back, and she looked like a woman who had just taken a 7-hour flight and was running on will alone, but was going to make absolutely sure you couldn't tell. She stopped when she saw Amara. It was a brief stop, a single beat, a micro-adjustment, and then she continued to the chair on her side of the table and sat down with the composure of someone resuming a meeting that had been briefly interrupted. Ms. Williams, she said. Not a greeting, an acknowledgement. Sora. Amara said just the name. Nothing attached to it. Sora looked at Jae-hyun. The journalist has been contacted. Yes. By Marcus Webb. Yes. She absorbed that, set her bag on the table beside her, unhurried. Marcus Webb has a conflict of interest. His personal relationship with Ms. Williams compromises his sourcing credibility. Marcus Webb has 6 months of documented research on the Kang organization that was sourced entirely before he knew I was involved in this, Amara said. His editors know his methodology. A conflict of interest disclosure doesn't erase the documentation. Sora looked at her directly for the first time. It was the look of a woman taking a measurement. You've been busy this morning, she said. I have. You're trying to build an evidentiary counter-record before the story publishes. I already built it. It took about 90 minutes. Amara's voice was level. I do this for a living. Something moved in Sora's expression. Not quite respect, but its difficult cousin. I know what you do. I know you do. You've been researching me for 7 weeks. Amara folded her hands on the table. You pulled my medical records 6 weeks ago. You bought a burner phone in Buckhead 3 days before you got on the plane. You've been in Atlanta, or had someone in Atlanta, since before Jae-hyun landed. She paused. You've been thorough. I'll give you that. Sora turned to Jae-hyun. Lee Sung-min. Yes, he's always been too honest for his own good. She said it without particular bitterness. Your father used to say that about him. Said he was useful precisely because he followed instructions exactly, but that his exactness would eventually become a liability. She paused. It appears your father was right. My father was right about a lot of operational things, Jae-hyun said. He was wrong about most of the things that mattered. Sora looked at the table for a moment. When she looked up, something in her face had shifted. Not broken, not softened, but reorganized around something more honest than the composed exterior she'd arrived with. I'm not going to tell you I regret it, she said. I've decided I'm not going to do that because it would be a performance and you would both know it was a performance and it would insult you. She looked at Amara. What I did to you 13 years ago was deliberate and calculated, and I made a choice to do it, and I have spent 13 years not particularly losing sleep over it. And I think you'd rather have that truth than a staged apology. The room held the statement for a moment. Yes, Amara said. I would. I wanted him, Sora said. It came out plain. Not the name and not the organization, though those mattered. I wanted him specifically. I had wanted him since we were children in adjacent social circles, and our families had always assumed we would end up together, and then he went to that school and he came back different, and I understood immediately that the difference had a name. She looked at Jae-hyun. You looked at me for the first time after you came back, and I could see that you were looking through me to something else, and I understood that the something else was her. I had one window, and I used it. Bao maspasate. You told a 22-year-old woman that the man she loved had rejected their child, Jae-hyun said. His voice was quiet and even and very cold. You sat in her apartment and you said those words with my name attached to them. Yes? And it was easy. You said it was easy. Sora was quiet for a moment. I said that because it was true, and because I was reporting to your grandmother, and I was 24, and I had just won something I'd been trying to win for 3 years, and I had not yet learned enough about consequences to understand what winning that way actually costs. She looked at her hands. I understand it now. For whatever that's worth, which I imagine is very little. Amara was looking at her with an expression that was not forgiveness and was not hatred. It was something more complex and more exhausting than either. The expression of a woman who has just been handed the interior of the thing that destroyed her and is discovering that understanding it doesn't make it lighter. The journalist, Amara said. Pull the story. Sora looked at her. You have enough access to him to have built this whole operation through him. You have enough influence to pull it. Amara held her gaze. I'm not asking for me. The counter record is already built. Marcus's version publishes either way. I'm asking because the story you gave him is a lie by omission, and you know it, and publishing a lie by omission about a real woman's real medical history is a line that doesn't get uncrossed. Silence. Pull it, Amara said again. That's the one thing I'm asking from you directly. Not an apology. Not an explanation. Pull the story. Sora looked at her for a long time. The afternoon light had moved to a lower angle through the conference room windows, laying a long rectangle of pale gold across the table between them. In that light, Sora Min looked exactly her age. Not old, not diminished, but fully arrived at the weight of the years. The way people look when they have stopped expending energy on appearing otherwise. She took out her phone. She made a call. She said 4 words into it. Pull it, we're done. And ended the call and put the phone back on the table. Done, she said. Nobody said anything for a moment. Sora picked up her bag. She stood. She looked at Jae-hyun and she held that look for several seconds. Not with longing, not with grief, but with the particular clarity of a woman who is taking a final accounting of something and accepting the number. I hope it was worth it, she said, what you're burning down to get back to her. I genuinely hope it turns out to be worth it. It already is, he said. She nodded once. She walked out. She didn't look back, which Amara noted and thought was probably the most honest thing Sora Min had ever done in either of their presence. The acknowledgement, contained in that single absence of a backward glance, that there was nothing left here for her, and she knew it. The door closed. The room was very quiet. Amara sat at the table for a moment without moving. Then she pressed both hands over her face briefly. Not crying, just pressing, the physical gesture of a person who needs to feel their own face for a second to confirm they are still in it. And then she dropped her hands and exhaled and looked at the ceiling. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. She looked at him. Marcus publishes this afternoon? He said 4 hours. That was about 2 hours ago. Then it's done. She stood up. The organizational exposure. You understand what that looks like going forward? Yes. Your father's methods become public record. The record. What was done to me. She said it carefully, not as a wound, but as a document. That becomes part of whatever story gets told about the Kang organization. I know. And you're prepared for that. He looked at her steadily. I've spent 20 years building something on a foundation my father poured. I've known for a long time that the foundation was compromised. I just kept building because I didn't have a reason compelling enough to stop. He paused. I have one now. She was quiet for a moment. Something moved in her eyes. Not the old warmth exactly, not the 22-year-old certainty she'd once had, but something that had survived the distance between that girl and this woman, worn down and made harder and more real for everything it had been through. I'm not the same person, she said. I know. I'm not going to be the same. You should understand that. Whatever you're imagining when you look at me, whoever you kept in your head for 12 years, that's not who I am. She went through things and she came out someone different, and you're going to have to learn who that person is from the beginning. I know that too. It's going to be slow. Okay, And I'm going to be difficult about it. I've been told I'm socially selective, which is a polite way of saying I don't let people in easily, and when I do, I have very high standards for what that means, and I will absolutely send you away if you can't meet them. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, something smaller and more careful, the facial expression of a man who has not had occasion to make that movement in a very long time and is relearning the muscle. I know. Stop saying you know. I do, though. She looked at him. He looked at her. The conference room was quiet around them, and the afternoon light moved another degree across the table, and somewhere in the hotel below them, Atlanta was doing its ordinary afternoon things, entirely unconcerned. I want to go home, she said. I need to be in my apartment for a while. I need to make dinner, and I need to not be in a conference room. Okay, you should stay, for a few days at least. Not, she paused, not at my apartment, but in Atlanta. I think I need to know you're findable before I can decide anything. I'll stay as long as you need. She picked up her laptop and her bag. She walked to the door and stopped with her hand on the frame and turned back, and for just a second she let him see it. The whole of it, the tiredness and the grief and the 12 years of organized survival, and underneath all of it, still there, still present, despite everything that had been done to extinguish it. The specific thing that had made her get in her car and drive to a hotel on Peachtree at 7:43 in the evening when she should have stayed home. The bracelet, she said. He looked down at his wrist. Don't take it off, she said. Not yet. She left. Marcus Webb's piece published at 4:17 that afternoon. Jae-hyun read it as a hotel room, standing at the window. It was long and rigorously sourced, and it did not sensationalize, which was Marcus's method. A method Jae-hyun understood now that Amara had trusted specifically because she knew it. It laid out the full timeline. It named Kang Dae-jung's methods and the specific record. It named Sora Min's 7-week operation. It named Lee Sung-min in his statement. It quoted from the emails Amara had sent to the grandmother Kor, with Amara's permission, a note at the end confirmed. And it did not frame Amara as a victim. It framed her as a woman who had sought the truth for 13 years and found it through her own work. And it was accurate, and it was precise, and it was the kind of piece that left very little room for an alternative narrative to take hold. The other journalists did not publish. Marcus had reached him directly, as he'd said he would, and whatever had passed between them had been sufficient. The curated package Sora had built sat in a folder somewhere and would not become a story, because the real story had already occupied the space. By evening, the Kong organization's response team in Seoul was managing the fallout, which was significant but not unsurvivable because Jae-hyun had spent the day being fully transparent with his own legal counsel for the first time in his professional life, and had discovered that the truth, properly documented and proactively disclosed, was a more defensible position than the alternative. It was not a comfortable position. It was not a position without consequences. Several contracts would be voided. Several relationships would require renegotiation. The organization would be smaller in 6 months than it was today and would need to be rebuilt on different terms, and that rebuilding would take years. He found he minded less than he had expected to. 3 days later, Amara called him. "Do you know why your grandmother never replied to my emails?" she said. No greeting. She'd been thinking about it, he could tell. "No," he said. "I've thought about it every day since I found the laptop." "I think she didn't know what to do," Amara said. "I think she was an old woman who loved her grandson and who had also been handed a truth that implicated her own family, and she didn't know how to carry it, so she kept it. She kept everything. She kept it in the only way she knew how, which was to preserve it and wait and hope that eventually the right person would open the right door." A pause. "I'm not forgiving her for the silence, but I think I understand it." "I think so too. She left it for you." "Yes. She left it for you to find, and she set the password to something she knew you'd remember eventually." Amara was quiet for a moment. She was doing what she could, with what she had, in the limited way she could do it. That's usually all any of us are doing. He had no answer for that. He didn't think she was looking for one. "I want to show you something," she said. "Tomorrow, if you're still in Atlanta." "I am. There's a park I walk in. I go there in the mornings. I want to walk there with you." It was the smallest possible thing. A park, a morning walk. The ordinary offering of an ordinary space that a person has claimed as their own and is choosing to let someone else into. He understood, with the particular clarity of a man who had spent 12 years in emotional isolation, that it was not a small thing at all. "What time?" he said. "7," she said. "Don't be late. I have a system." "What, Galam?" They walked for an hour and a half without resolving anything. That was what he remembered afterward. Not a conversation that arrived somewhere, not a moment that sealed what they were becoming, just the specific experience of moving through a park in the early morning with a woman he had loved at 17 and was learning again at 35, side by side with their shoulders occasionally close, and the Atlanta air still cool with the remnant of night, and the trees doing what trees do in the morning, which is simply be present and unhurried and entirely unconcerned with human complexity. She pointed out a red-tailed hawk on a power line. She told him she'd seen it every Tuesday for 4 months and had decided it lived in the park and had named it, privately, which she wouldn't tell him because it was embarrassing. He told her she should tell him. She said no. He said he would make peace with not knowing. She said good. At some point she had stopped maintaining the careful distance she'd started the walk with, and their arms were touching, and neither of them mentioned it. He told her, walking, about the ring. He had not planned to. It came out because she had asked him, in passing, what he'd done with his father's things after the estate was settled, and the answer led to the archive. And the archive led to a small box he'd found inside it, and the box had a ring he'd bought in Seoul 13 years ago, at a market near the school, 2 weeks before his father's men came for him in the night. He'd been 17 and impulsive and completely certain, the way 17-year-olds are certain when they haven't yet learned how much can go wrong. He'd bought the ring and put it in his jacket pocket and been planning to give it to her when she came back from visiting her mother for the weekend, and he'd never gotten the chance. His father's people had found it in his jacket, had kept it in the archive, documented it as personal effects, a line item in the inventory of a life they had considered a problem they were solving. He'd found it in a small envelope with her name written on the outside in his own 17-year-old handwriting. Amara listened to all of this without interrupting. They had stopped walking without meaning to, standing on the path with the morning coming fully through the trees now, warm and direct. "Where is it?" she said. "Seoul, in my apartment." He paused. "I could have it sent." She looked at him for a long moment. The hawk on the power line, which she thought had probably long since moved on, was somehow still there, motionless, doing what hawks do, watching everything with a patience that was not waiting exactly, but something more like simply understanding that things happened in their own time, and that there was no point in rushing what hadn't arrived yet. "Not yet," she said. "There's no yet. Don't make it a yet." "Okay." He held her gaze. "When you're ready, I'll tell you. I know." She almost said don't say I know again and then didn't, because he did know, and because some things you keep to yourself when the moment is handling itself correctly. She started walking again. He fell into step beside her. The park continued around them, doing what it did every morning. The light shifting through the canopy, a dog pulling its owner toward the water fountain, a woman jogging past with headphones in, the city beginning its Tuesday morning in all its indifferent, ongoing, ordinary life. She put her hand in the space between them, not reaching for him exactly, just placing it there, open, available. He looked down at it. He looked at the old bracelet on his own wrist, faded and worn and present, 12 years of daily contact having made it as familiar as his own skin. He looked at her hand. He put his hand in hers. They walked. There were months ahead of them that would be difficult. There were legal proceedings and organizational restructurings, and a world that had just read a detailed account of everything that had been done and would have opinions about all of it. There were conversations they had not yet had, and wounds that had been cleaned but were not healed, and the slow, unglamorous work of building trust between two people who had been shaped by loss into careful and self-sufficient versions of themselves that would not yield easily or quickly to the presence of another person. There was all of that. It was real, and it was waiting. But right now there was a park in Atlanta on a Tuesday morning, and a hawk on a power line that had a name she wouldn't say out loud, and a man who had worn a faded bracelet on his wrist for 12 years walking beside a woman who had spent 12 years making her apartment immaculate as proof that she had survived, and between them, in the simple fact of two hands held on an ordinary path on an ordinary morning, something that had been through everything designed to destroy it and had come through the other side, not intact exactly, not unchanged, but alive. Still alive, that was enough. That was, for now, entirely enough.